right, welcome to another episode of Catholic Conversations. As always, I'm your host, Joelle Zarnowski, and today I'm joined by Father John Rose, who is a former director of the Christ the King Retreat House here in the diocese. He's also a spiritual director for 40 years and currently doing some work with Interfaith Works. And so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Thanks. So we are starting a new year, nice and fresh, and so this is kind of the time of year where people are starting to do their resolutions. You know, I'm going to go to the gym every day, and I'm going to eat healthier, and I'm going to quit smoking, whatever it is. So with the start of the new year, why do you, as a spiritual director, why do you feel that that's such a good fitting time for people to make those resolutions?
Well, I think it's a very appropriate time. It's the beginning of a new year. It's an ending of an old year. And January is named after the Roman god Janus, Janus, sometimes pronounced Janus, but still spelled Janus. And the god Janus was one who looked back and looked forward. So it had two faces. One was turned to the back of his head, looking back at what was, hopefully with gratitude and recognizing the blessings and everything that happened. And the other face looking forward to something new, to a future of hope, a future that's unknown, unforeseen. But so I think it's very appropriate. Like you said, people make many resolutions. The gyms are packed on January, a lot of new memberships, but they tend to dwindle very quickly after that. But the resolution is there that I want to do something different. I want to improve myself. Maybe I can be better at a particular skill or whatever, so a hobby. So I think it's appropriate that people make spiritual resolutions too. Now, those things we've named can be spiritual in a sense because it's about self-improvement, growth, but specifically spiritually, how do I want to grow more intentionally to develop my spirituality? So if I look back over the previous years, I think a spiritual question for people to ask themselves was, where was God for me? What was God like? What was my experience of God? How I've grown, and did God have anything to do with that kind of growth, spiritually or otherwise? Or to become more fully human is really to become more spiritual. Spirituality is about my relationship with God, my relationship with others, and my relationship with myself too. So the more we pay attention to where God was in our life and look at what might God be inviting me to, the more we can grow. Because unless we take some quiet time or reflection time, we can miss God. Now, I know that's very difficult for a lot of our viewers, especially if they have little children, they're working a job or two jobs, or the day is just filled up from beginning to end. Some people say, well, the only time I get is in the bathroom, which can be true. But St. Ignatius, way back in the 1500s, founded the Jesuits. We have Jesuits right here in our diocese at Le Moyne College, throughout the world. And St. Ignatius invited all Jesuits twice a day to stop, once at noontime, once at the end of the day, and look back for where God was, kind of a rummage sale. So in my morning, if I look back at noon and say, wow, it's crazy busy, I didn't have any time, but let me just see, oh, wow, that was a beautiful sunrise that I saw this morning. Or I'm still savoring some of the letters or Christmas cards I got in the past few weeks. Or I met with somebody in that meeting I was a little nervous about, but it was just a wonderful experience. I received something from him, and hopefully I helped him too. So God is kind of in the details,
Right.
So we can miss God unless we stop. Kathleen Norris wrote this wonderful book called Acedia, Acedia, which is about boredom. Sometimes it happens in monasteries. The schedule is the same every day. But she says in modern day times, acedia is like busyness. If I'm busy, distracted all the time, and I never think of God during my day, what opportunities could I miss for my own development in terms of how God is trying to invite me for discernment, to be mindful, to be purposeful, about my spiritual growth as a disciple of Christ.
Right, right. So for people who do have those really busy lives and maybe they don't think consciously to stop and take a moment, what are some resolutions like that you think they could make intentionally for this year to bring them into a closer relationship with God? You mentioned the Ignatian practice of stopping twice a day to be more mindful and pay attention to those things, but are there other things that people could do?
Yes. One thing is, I think, maybe even at a mealtime, to take some deep breaths, to be mindful and ask myself, how can I intentionally be more kind, more merciful, more forgiving toward people during my day? How do I align myself with Jesus and align myself with the Gospels? Those can be practical things. So if our feelings is where God speaks to us, I think. To pay attention to our heart. Oftentimes we live in our heads. But what is my heart telling me? If I'm angry about something, perhaps some of the injustices I experience in the world, what kind of control do I have over that in my work environment, my family environment, my neighborhood? Just to intentionally look at everybody like they are the face of Christ. And because God resides in each one of us. And so to make eye contact, to say good morning. Some people maybe don't have a lot of friends or other people other than colleagues at work. So for me, for you, for us, all of us, to treat people by opening a door, by smiling, those can be small things, but can be big things too. St. Teresa of Lisieux said, do little things well. Now, Dorothy Day, who's up for, I believe, beatification or canonization, kind of poo-pooed that. She said, oh, that's crazy, what St. Teresa of Lisieux said. But as she spent more and more time with the poor and the unhoused and people who were mistreated, she saw that the little things were critically important. And Mother Teresa did that so well, too, didn't she?
Yes.
She paid attention to her experience of God. Her experience of God was on a train going to Calcutta in India, and she heard this inner voice that said, be poor with the poor. And so she started this order of the Missionary Sisters of Charity and treated each person in the streets, what were called the untouchables, with care, with love, bandaged their wounds, cleaned them up, and we don't have the opportunity to do that, but to do little things well. And Mother Teresa said, you don't need to be successful, just be faithful to who we're called to be.
Right. Yeah. I think that's such a profound thing that people don't realize is those little things and how they can really make such a difference. I know even just in my own experience, having somebody tell me like, you look really nice today when I'm having kind of a down day or I'm not feeling great about myself, just to hear that from another person.
It uplifts you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Makes you feel
absolutely.
better
And they
about
might not
yourself.
even realize.
Yeah, just to be acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really great thing. And I think that people don't realize what a big impact that can make. So that's wonderful. And then so with this, I think that a lot of times people think of resolutions as like, okay, this is going to be something that I check off every day. It's going to become a habit. How can our listeners, all of us, discern whether a resolution that we're choosing is spiritual versus just another task to check off a list?
That's a great question. Well, we all have tasks and jobs we have to do every day. We have to do the dishes, prepare the meals, clean the house, shovel the driveway, mow the lawn, whatever. And, we can feel good. We got that all done, and that's good. But that's just kind of, it ends there. But with a spiritual resolution, it's transformative. I become different. Like you said, when somebody says, love the outfit you have on, you feel different. So, but if we specifically do intentionality of reaching out to people, for example, we see the fruits of our labors. We feel more joyful. It's longer lasting than doing a task and getting that accomplished. Transformative makes me feel different about myself. And if you look at the Gospels specifically, everybody in the Gospels was different after they encountered Jesus. They were one way before they encountered him. They were different after they heard him.
Mm-hmm.
So important to pay attention to our experiences. For example, Mary. She got a visit by the angel. We just heard that proclaimed during Christmas, in the first chapter of Luke. A visit by God. We don't oftentimes get that ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the angel Gabriel said, Mary, will you be the mother of God's son? And ultimately she said, yes, I am the maidservant of the Lord. So she found her identity. She knew she was the chosen one to be the mother of God. Same thing with Jesus. He was 30 years of age, we're told, when he was baptized. And he heard this voice when he was baptized, saying, this is my beloved son. And that experience gave him his identity for the rest of his life. Even when he faced the temptations that he would face for the next 3 years to be powerful, to have a lot of money and wealth and status and privilege, he rejected those because he knew who he was. We know who we are. We go back. That's why it's important to read Scripture,
Mm-hmm.
if we can. Just, if we're going to know Jesus, we have to know the Gospels. And so we hear them every weekend at Mass, but can we read a Gospel from the beginning to the end? Luke's Gospel, for example. Take one chapter a day or one a week or however much time I have. That's a good example of in Luke's Gospel because there are so many people that Jesus uses his power not to dominate, but to empower, particularly women who were, pretty much invisible during those days. They didn't have a role. But he empowered them. And another example of paying attention to an experience is the Emmaus journey. We always read that in Easter time, Luke 24. And 2 disciples had always followed Jesus for 3 years. They'd been chosen. And but when Jesus got crucified, their hope was crucified with that. They lost hope. So they were leaving Jerusalem, going the wrong way, maybe going to Vegas, so to speak, wherever Emmaus was.
Yeah.
But anyhow, they had declared themselves ex-disciples of a dead prophet. They thought he was going to overcome the Roman Empire militarily, politically, but of course he was nonviolent.
Mm-hmm.
So as they're walking 7 miles, how long does it take to walk 7 miles? 2.5 hours, 3 hours? There's a stranger. We know it's Jesus, as close as you and I are sitting here. But they didn't know it. Jesus always comes in the form of a stranger, always wears a disguise.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only when it was getting dark that they said, well, join us, come on in. And it was in the breaking of the bread. They recognized it was Jesus, and with that, he disappeared. But they ran back in the dark, transformed. They recognized, they said, wow, their eyes were open. Weren't our hearts burning? Jesus is sometimes called the arsonist of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that now they ran back as prophets of a risen Christ, a risen Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a transformative experience. So that's how it's different, I think, from just ordinary tasks.
Right.
There's a feeling that stays with me.
Right. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. So as we move forward into this new year, is there any other advice that you would give to our listeners as far as just thinking about how they want to enter into this year, anything that they can do to kind of increase their relationship with God outside of the resolutions?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are facing a lot of anxiety these days. There's been a lot of fear-mongering, and we don't know what to expect down the road. And so it's easy to isolate or perhaps read or watch too much TV. So I find myself, years ago, I stopped watching the news. I just read the newspaper. I can choose what I want to see. But I felt myself getting angry or anxious or even depressed, not clinically, but just like, oh, what's going on with all this suffering, with all the violence in the world? That's all we're exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So paying attention to our feelings, if the news is overwhelming, have to set boundaries. Read the good news.
Right.
And be part of a Christian community, the Catholic Church. We need other people so that we can be supported If we're just isolated or cut off, we can feel a little discouraged. That's why it's important for some of our viewers, if they want a resolution, to maybe call up the parish secretary and find out a list of people who are shut in or live by themselves who can't get out, and give them a phone call once a week. Bring the Eucharist. Reach out to the bereaved. Even do some volunteer work. Our parishes always need volunteers.
Yes.
Our food pantries, our soup kitchens. I just recently started volunteering at a soup kitchen, Emmaus Ministry in Syracuse here.
Yeah.
And I have a men's group and a women's group. And the people come in, they're unhoused, they maybe have some mental disabilities, they don't have transportation, but they're gracious and they feel respected there. And I asked one guy, I just started a men's group and a women's group, one of the guys in the group, I said, what gives you strength? What gives you hope? He said, God's got my back. I wake up and I say to God, I am blessed. Thank you for my life. So just to say thank you as we get out of bed.
Yeah. Those are all wonderful ideas. And hopefully, our listeners take what you've given us today and they, take that into the new year and find some things that will help them be transformed and grow in relationship with God. That's really, I think, our mission here with this podcast is to help people, find their way and grow closer in relationship with God. So thank you for all of your insights.
You're more than welcome.
And thank you so much for being here again today. And to all of our listeners, we will see you next week. Make sure you like and subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen.